The plasma bolt missed Lieutenant Jake Morrison's helmet by inches. He dove behind a crumbling wall, breathing hard, his rifle hot in his gloved hands. The Kreth warship loomed overhead, its shadow blocking out 3 suns on the desert planet of Varos 7. This was supposed to be a simple reconnaissance mission. Nothing was ever simple anymore. Jake's earpiece crackled. Enemy movement, 200 meters east. His squad was pinned down, ammunition running low, and extraction was still 20 minutes out. 20 minutes felt like forever when death rained from above every few seconds. He checked his ammunition counter. 43 rounds left. Not good. Movement caught his eye through the dust and smoke. Something small, darting between the ruins of what used to be a residential district. Not military. A civilian. Jake's training screamed at him to stay put, to focus on survival. But the figure stumbled, fell, and he heard something that made his blood run cold. A child's cry. Not human. The high-pitched trill of a Valthene youngling. The Valthene were allies. Peaceful traders who had opened their borders to humanity when the Kreth Empire declared war on half the galaxy. This planet was a trading hub before the bombardment started 3 days ago. There shouldn't be any civilians left. Evacuation protocols had been executed. Another plasma bolt struck near the small figure, and Jake made his decision. He sprinted from cover, legs pumping, ignoring the shouts from his squad leader. The ruins provided some protection as he zigzagged toward the child. She was tiny, no more than 4 feet tall, with the distinctive purple skin and silver eyes of the Valthene. Her clothes were torn and burned. Blood, bright blue against her skin, dripped from a gash on her arm. She looked up at him with terrified eyes as he reached her. Jake didn't speak Valthene, but fear was universal. He scooped her up, shielding her body with his own, as another volley of fire erupted around them. She weighed almost nothing. Getting back to cover was harder. The Kreth had spotted him. Energy weapons lit up the air around them, turning sand to glass where they struck. Jake felt the heat through his armor. His HUD showed damage to his left shoulder plate, still functional but barely. He dove behind a larger structure, rolling to protect the child. She clutched at his armor, making sounds he couldn't understand, but the message was clear. She was alone. She was scared. She was hurt. Jake's squad leader's voice crackled in his ear, angry and worried. What the hell was he thinking? They had their own lives to worry about. But Jake had seen enough death. If he could save one life today, maybe it would mean something. Maybe it would balance the scales just a little. The child's silver eyes met his, and despite everything, despite the war and the chaos and the likelihood they would both die in the next 10 minutes, she seemed to calm down. She touched his faceplate gently with one small hand. Jake checked his rifle again. 37 rounds. He looked at the sky where the extraction shuttle should appear. Still 15 minutes. The Kreth were closing in, their war cries echoing through the ruins. He held the child closer and prepared to fight. If they wanted her, they would have to go through him first. That was what humans did. They protected the innocent, even when it was stupid, even when the odds were impossible. Especially then. The child whispered something in her language. Jake didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. She was thanking him. He nodded and raised his rifle. The first Kreth soldier appeared around the corner, and Jake squeezed the trigger. This was going to be a long 15 minutes. 12 minutes later, the extraction shuttle dropped through the smoke and fire like an angel of mercy. Jake's ammunition counter read 0. He had used his knife for the last 2 Kreth soldiers who had gotten too close. The child was still alive, still clutched against his chest. His armor was scored and cracked in a dozen places. Blood, his own this time, ran down his left arm. The shuttle's ramp dropped, and hands reached out to pull them aboard. Jake stumbled up the ramp, legs shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. His squad members were already inside, battered, but alive. Corporal Danny Fletcher grabbed the child from Jake's arms as he collapsed onto the metal floor. The shuttle lifted off, engines screaming as it pushed through the atmosphere. Kreth fighters pursued, but the human pilot was better. They always were. Something about human reflexes and pattern recognition that gave them an edge in dogfights. The ship twisted and dove, and one by one the pursuing fighters fell behind or fell apart. Jake lay on the floor, breathing hard, staring at the ceiling. The child was with the medic now, getting her wounds treated. She kept looking back at him, those silver eyes wide and grateful. Fletcher crouched beside Jake, checking his wounds. "You're insane," Fletcher said, but his voice held respect rather than criticism. "Completely insane. That kid better be worth it." "She is," Jake replied. "Every life is worth it." "That's what makes us different from them. The Kreth fought for conquest and glory. Humanity fought for something else, for the idea that every sentient being deserved a chance. For the belief that strength meant protecting the weak, not exploiting them. It was a human concept, and the galaxy was still learning what that meant." The shuttle docked with the human carrier Redemption 3 hours later. Jake had been patched up by the medic, given painkillers and water. The child stayed close to him the entire journey, refusing to let anyone else hold her. She didn't speak English, and Jake didn't speak Valthene, but they had communicated in the way soldiers and survivors always did, through shared danger and shared survival. The carrier's medical bay was busy. Casualties from the ground operation were being treated, and the news was mixed. They had held the line long enough for most civilians to evacuate, but the cost had been high. Jake carried the child into the bay looking for someone who could help her properly. That was when he saw her. The Valthene woman stood near the back of the medical bay, speaking urgently with the human doctor. She was tall, over 7 feet, with the same purple skin as the child but with intricate silver markings that denoted high rank. Her robes were torn and dirty, and her face was a mask of desperate anguish. She was searching for someone. Jake knew that look. He had seen it on the faces of parents in every war zone he had ever been in. The look of someone who had lost their child and would tear the universe apart to find them again. The child in Jake's arms suddenly went rigid. Then she made a sound, a high-pitched trill that cut through all the noise in the medical bay. The tall woman's head snapped around, her silver eyes going wide. For a moment, the entire bay seemed to freeze. Then the woman was moving, running despite her obvious injuries, her face transforming from anguish to desperate hope. The child was squirming in Jake's arms, reaching out, crying in her own language. A single word, repeated over and over. "Mom." Jake set the child down, and she ran on unsteady legs straight into the woman's arms. They collided in a tangle of limbs and tears, the woman falling to her knees to hold her daughter, both of them making sounds that transcended language. Pure relief. Pure joy. Pure love. The medical bay had gone silent. Human soldiers and Valthene civilians alike watched the reunion, many with tears in their own eyes. War made everyone familiar with loss. Moments like this, moments of recovery and reunion, were precious beyond measure. The woman held her daughter close, rocking her, checking her for injuries, murmuring in Valthene. The child was crying and laughing at the same time, clutching at her mother's robes. Then the woman looked up, her silver eyes finding Jake where he stood a few feet away. She spoke in heavily accented English. You brought her back!" Jake nodded, suddenly feeling awkward. "Just doing my job, ma'am." The woman stood slowly, still holding her daughter, and Jake saw the markings on her robes more clearly. His eyes widened. Those weren't just rank insignia. They were royal emblems. This wasn't just a Valthene civilian. This was someone important. Very important. The human doctor Jake had seen earlier stepped forward, his face pale. "Lieutenant Morrison, do you know who this is?" Jake shook his head. The doctor swallowed hard. "This is Queen Lyria of the Valthene Star Collective. She was on Varos 7 for peace negotiations when the Kreth attacked. We thought we had evacuated all the diplomatic staff, but her daughter was separated during the bombardment. We've been searching for 3 days." The galaxy tilted slightly. Jake had rescued the daughter of an alien queen. He had risked his life and his squad's lives for royalty without even knowing it. The irony wasn't lost on him. He would have done the same thing if she had been a farmer's daughter. Every life mattered equally. Queen Lyria stepped forward, still holding her daughter. Her eyes were wet with tears, something Jake hadn't known Valthene could do. She reached out one hand and placed it over Jake's heart, a gesture he didn't understand but felt the weight of. "You gave me back my world," she said, her voice breaking. "My daughter is my heart, my soul, my reason for living. When I lost her, I lost everything." "You gave it back. There is no debt that can repay this. No honor that can match it. You have my eternal gratitude and the gratitude of my entire people." Jake didn't know what to say. He settled for the truth. "I'm just glad she's safe, Your Majesty. That's all that matters." The Queen's daughter, still in her mother's arms, reached out to Jake. She touched his cheek with one small hand, and in halting, careful English, she said the only human words she knew. "Thank you." Jake felt something crack inside his chest. All the death and destruction, all the violence and horror of the last 3 days suddenly felt worth it. One child saved. One family reunited. Maybe that was what humanity brought to the galaxy. Not just military might or tactical brilliance, but the stubborn, foolish belief that individual lives mattered, that you saved the child in front of you, even if it was tactically stupid. Especially if it was tactically stupid. Because that was what separated them from the Kreth, from the empires that saw sentient beings as resources and collateral damage. Humans saw people. They saw children who needed saving and parents who needed their children back. And they acted on that, consequences be damned. Queen Lyria was speaking again, her voice stronger now. "You must come with me, Lieutenant Jake Morrison. I need to know everything that happened. How you found her, how you kept her safe. And I need to thank you properly, in the way of my people." Jake nodded, exhausted, but willing. As he followed the Queen out of the medical bay, her daughter still watching him with those grateful silver eyes, he felt his squad leader clap him on the shoulder. Fletcher was grinning. "You really are insane," Fletcher said, "but I'm starting to think that's exactly what this galaxy needs." "A little human insanity." Jake smiled tiredly. Insanity or humanity. Sometimes it was hard to tell the difference. But if insanity meant saving children and reuniting families, then he would wear that label with pride. That was what humans did. They showed the galaxy what it meant to care about every single life, no matter the cost. And judging by the look on Queen Lyria's face, the galaxy was starting to pay attention. The Queen's chambers aboard the Redemption were far more luxurious than anything Jake had seen on a military vessel. Apparently, when you were evacuating alien royalty, you made accommodations. Soft lighting, flowing fabrics that seemed to shift colors, and furniture that adjusted to whoever sat in it. Jake felt distinctly out of place in his battered combat armor. Queen Lyria sat with her daughter in her lap, still unwilling to let her go. The child had fallen asleep finally, exhausted from her ordeal. A Valthene healer had treated her injuries and pronounced her healthy despite everything. Children were resilient. Jake had learned that in every war zone he had ever been in. The Queen looked at Jake with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Tell me everything," she said. "How did you find her?" The evacuation was chaos, and when the buildings started collapsing, I lost her hand for just a moment. Just one moment, and she was gone. I have been searching ever since, even after they told me she must be dead. Jake told the story simply, without embellishment. The pinned-down squad, the spotted movement, the decision to run into open fire. Queen Lyria listened without interrupting, her hand stroking her daughter's hair gently. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised him. "You are not the first human I have met, Lieutenant Morrison, but you are the first who has shown me what your people truly are." "I have heard the stories, of course. How humans fight with a ferocity that defies logic. How you never leave your wounded behind. How you throw yourselves into impossible situations for the smallest chance of victory. But I did not understand until now. You do not fight like other species. You fight as if every single life is personally important to you." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "That's just basic decency, Your Majesty. Any soldier would have done the same." The Queen shook her head. No, Lieutenant, they would not. I have been at war for 3 cycles now. I have seen soldiers from 20 different species. They fight for their nations, their territories, their beliefs. But humans fight for something else. You fight for each other. For strangers. For children you have never met and will never see again. It is not logic. It is not strategy. It is something deeper. She looked down at her sleeping daughter. In my culture, there is a concept called the life debt. When someone saves the life of another, especially the life of a child, they become bonded. Protector and protected. It is the deepest bond our people recognize. Deeper than marriage. Deeper than blood. You, Lieutenant Jake Morrison, now hold a life debt from the royal family of Valthene. My daughter's life, and by extension my own, belongs to you. Jake's eyes widened. Your Majesty, that's not necessary. I didn't save her for a reward or recognition. I just did what needed to be done. I know, Queen Lyria said softly. That is why you deserve it. The life debt is not about payment or obligation. It is about recognition of true courage and compassion. You will have the friendship and protection of the Valthene people for as long as you live. And when the time comes, if you ever need us, we will answer. That is my vow! Before Jake could respond, the door to the chambers opened. A human officer entered, a Captain Jake recognized from briefings, Captain Lisa Brennan, the Redemption's diplomatic liaison. She looked harried and slightly overwhelmed. Your Majesty, she said, bowing slightly. I apologize for the interruption, but the situation has developed rapidly. News of the princess's rescue has spread through both the human and Valthene fleets. The media is calling it a turning point in human-Valthene relations. There are requests for interviews, statements, official ceremonies. The Admiralty wants to leverage this for morale purposes. Queen Lyria's expression hardened. My daughter is not propaganda. Captain Brennan held up her hands. Of course not, Your Majesty. But the story is already out there. A human soldier risking his life to save an alien child during a combat operation. It resonates with both our peoples. The Valthene public is calling Lieutenant Morrison a hero. And frankly, morale has been low since the Kreth offensive began. This could be exactly what we need. Jake wanted to disappear through the floor. He hadn't signed up for this. He was a soldier, not a poster boy for interspecies cooperation. But he understood the larger picture. War wasn't just fought with weapons. It was fought with ideas and inspiration, and the will to keep going when everything looked hopeless. Queen Lyria looked at Jake. The choice is yours, Lieutenant. If you wish to avoid the attention, I will ensure your privacy. But if you are willing, your story could do great good. It could remind both our peoples why we fight. Not for territory or resources, but for the fundamental belief that life is precious. That children deserve to grow up safe. That we protect each other even across species lines. Jake thought about it. He thought about his squad, still out there fighting. About the soldiers who wouldn't make it home. About the families torn apart by this war. If his story could give people hope, could inspire them to keep fighting the good fight, then wasn't he obligated to tell it? I'll do it, he said finally. If it helps end this war faster, if it saves even one more life, then I'll tell the story as many times as I need to. Captain Brennan looked relieved. Thank you, Lieutenant. I'll coordinate with the media teams. We'll keep it controlled and respectful. No exploitation, just the facts. As the captain left, Queen Lyria stood, carefully transferring her sleeping daughter to a nearby couch piled with cushions. She turned back to Jake, and her expression was serious. You are about to become famous, Lieutenant Morrison. Both species will see you as a symbol of what we can achieve together. It will not be easy. Fame rarely is. But know that you have my support and the support of my people. You have shown us the best of humanity. We will not forget it. Jake nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. It was heavier than his combat armor, more pressing than enemy fire. But he had faced impossible situations before. He would face this one too, because that was what humans did. They stepped up, even when it was hard. even when it was scary. Even when they just wanted to go back to being anonymous soldiers doing their jobs. They stepped up because someone had to, and if not them, then who? Queen Lyria placed her hand over his heart again, that same meaningful gesture. "You have given me my daughter back," she said quietly. "But you have given your species something more. You have given them proof that their way of thinking, their way of fighting, their way of caring is not weakness. It is the greatest strength any species can have. The Kreth believe strength is domination. You have shown them that strength is protection. That is a lesson this galaxy desperately needs to learn." Jake left the Queen's chambers an hour later, his mind spinning. In the span of one day, he had gone from a regular soldier to an interspecies symbol of cooperation. It felt surreal. But as he walked through the ship's corridors, he started noticing the changes. Human soldiers stood a little straighter when they saw him. Valthene civilians bowed their heads in respect. Word traveled fast on a ship. Fletcher found him in the mess hall, sitting alone with a tray of food he wasn't really eating. His squad leader sat down across from him, grinning. "So, how does it feel to be a hero?" Jake shrugged. "Weird. Overwhelming. I just did what anyone would do." Fletcher laughed. "No, you didn't. Anyone else would have stayed in cover and waited for extraction. You ran into open fire for an alien kid you didn't even know. That's not normal, Jake. That's exceptional. And whether you like it or not, people need to see that right now. They need to believe that we're fighting for something that matters." Jake looked at his squad leader. "Did the rest of the squad make it back okay?" Fletcher's expression sobered. "We lost Martinez. Plasma bolt to the chest during the extraction. He didn't make it to the shuttle." Jake felt the familiar weight of survivor's guilt settle in his chest. He had saved one child, but a good soldier had died. The mathematics of war never balanced. "Every victory came with a cost. Martinez would have approved," Fletcher said quietly. "He was always the first one to volunteer for rescue operations. Hell, he probably would have made the same call you did. And Jake, he died knowing we saved that kid. He covered your retreat." "He made it possible. Don't dishonor his sacrifice by feeling guilty about it." Jake nodded, though the weight didn't lift. It never did. "Every soldier he had lost over the years stayed with him, a permanent reminder of the cost of war. But Fletcher was right. Martinez would have wanted that child saved. They all would have." The next few days were a blur. Jake did interview after interview telling the story of the rescue over and over until the words felt mechanical, but he watched the effect it had. Human soldiers stood taller, fought harder, knowing that their sacrifices meant something. Valthene civilians looked at humans with new eyes, seeing not just military allies, but people who genuinely cared about their lives. The Valthene Star Collective announced a new military partnership with humanity. More resources, more ships, more coordination. Queen Lyria gave speeches about the life debt and what it meant for her people's relationship with humans. The princess, whose name Jake learned was Alira, became a symbol of hope for children across the war zones. And through it all, Jake felt like he was watching someone else's life. He had just wanted to save a child. He hadn't meant to start a movement. But movements, he was learning, rarely started with grand intentions. They started with simple acts of decency that resonated with something deep in people's hearts. 3 weeks after the rescue, Jake was called to a formal ceremony aboard the Valthene flagship. He wore his dress uniform, feeling stiff and awkward. The ceremony was attended by high-ranking officers from both species, media representatives, and what seemed like half the Valthene noble families. Queen Lyria stood at the center of the room, Princess Alira beside her. The child had recovered fully from her ordeal and was smiling shyly at Jake. The Queen raised her hand and the room fell silent. "Lieutenant Jake Morrison of the human military," she began, her voice carrying through the chamber. "You have performed an act of courage and compassion that transcends species and culture. You risked your life to save my daughter, asking nothing in return. In doing so, you have honored the deepest values of both our peoples. Today, I formally recognize the life debt between Princess Alira and yourself. From this moment forward, you are considered a guardian of the royal line, a title held by only 3 other beings in our history. You are family to us now, Lieutenant Morrison. And family protects family. She approached him, carrying a small crystal pendant on a silver chain. The crystal glowed with an inner light that shifted between colors. "This is the Guardian's star," she said, placing it around his neck. "It marks you as one of our protectors. Wear it with honor." Jake felt the weight of the crystal against his chest. It was warm, almost alive. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I am honored beyond words." Princess Alira stepped forward, holding a small data pad. In carefully practiced English, she said, "I wrote this for you. My mother says humans like words." She handed him the data pad. Jake looked down at the screen. It was a child's drawing, rendered in digital form. It showed a human soldier in armor, holding the hand of a small Valthene child. Above them, 2 suns shone brightly. Below the image, in wobbly letters, was written, "My hero. Thank you for saving me. I will never forget." Jake felt tears prick at his eyes. He knelt down to Alira's level. "You are very brave, Princess." "I am proud to know you." Alira smiled and threw her arms around his neck in a gesture that was universal across species. A hug was a hug, no matter what form you took. Jake hugged her back, acutely aware that every camera in the room was recording this moment. But he didn't care. This was real. This mattered. The ceremony concluded with speeches and formal recognition from the human Admiralty as well. Jake was promoted to captain and given command of a special joint operations unit, combining human and Valthene forces. It was a position that would put him at the forefront of the war, but also in a position to save more lives. To make a real difference! As the ceremony ended and people began to mingle, Queen Lyria pulled Jake aside. "There is something you should know," she said quietly. "The Kreth Empire has put a substantial bounty on your head. You have become a symbol they wish to destroy. You will need to be careful." Jake wasn't surprised. Symbols were powerful, and the enemy knew it. "I can handle it, Your Majesty. I've been shot at before." The Queen smiled sadly. "I know you can. But please, be cautious. My daughter asks about you constantly. She calls you her guardian angel, though I do not think she fully understands what that means in your language. To lose you now would break her heart." "And mine," Jake nodded. "I'll be careful, I promise." He kept that promise for the next 6 months. His Joint Operations Unit became legendary, executing high-risk rescue missions across a dozen planets. They saved thousands of civilians, both human and Valthene. They disrupted Kreth supply lines and freed prisoner camps. And through it all, Jake wore the Guardian's star, a reminder of why he fought. But war has a way of collecting debts, and Jake's luck couldn't last forever. The mission on Kelrath 4 was supposed to be routine. Extract a group of human engineers trapped behind enemy lines. It went wrong from the start. The Kreth were waiting. They had learned about the mission somehow, and they had prepared a trap. Jake's unit walked right into it. The firefight was brutal. Half his team went down in the first 30 seconds. Jake found himself separated from the others, cut off and surrounded. He fought with everything he had, but there were too many. His armor took hit after hit until it finally failed. He felt the burning pain of a plasma bolt cutting through his side. Another hit his leg. He went down hard, his rifle clattering away. The Kreth soldiers closed in, their weapons aimed at his head. This was it. After everything, after all the missions and rescues and improbable survivals, this was where it ended. On a backwater planet, in a dirty alley, far from anyone who knew his name. One of the Kreth raised its weapon, and Jake closed his eyes, thinking of his family back on Earth. Thinking of Princess Alira and her child's drawing, thinking of all the people he had saved, and all the ones he wouldn't get to save now. The killing shot never came. Instead, he heard the distinctive scream of Valthene fighters overhead. Energy weapons lit up the sky, and the Kreth soldiers around him were suddenly under fire from above. Jake looked up through blurring vision and saw them. 3 Valthene cruisers dropping through the atmosphere like avenging angels. The lead ship bore the royal crest. Queen Lyria's personal fleet. They had come for him. The Kreth scattered under the onslaught. Valthene shock troops dropped from the cruisers, forming a protective perimeter around Jake's position. He tried to stand but couldn't. His leg wouldn't support him, and the pain in his side was overwhelming. A Valthene soldier knelt beside him, checking his wounds. "You are safe now, Guardian. The Queen sent us. She would not allow you to die." Jake laughed, though it hurt. Of course she did. The life debt. It went both ways. He had saved Illyra, and now Lyria was saving him. Family protects family, she had said. She had meant it. The Valthene got him to a medical ship. The human surgeons worked alongside Valthene healers, using techniques from both species to keep him alive. It was touch and go for a while. He flatlined twice on the operating table, but both times they brought him back. He woke up 3 days later in a medical bay aboard the Valthene flagship. Queen Lyria was sitting beside his bed, her expression a mixture of relief and sternness. Princess Illyra was there too, holding his hand gently. "You promised to be careful," the Queen said, but there was warmth in her voice. "I almost lost you, Guardian. Do not do that again," Jake smiled weakly. "I'll try, Your Majesty. But you know me. Trouble seems to find me." Illyra looked at him with her large silver eyes. "You scared me," she said in English. That was much better than the last time he had heard her speak. "I thought you would leave like my father did." She paused. "My father died in the war, before you saved me. I thought I would lose everyone." Jake's heart broke. He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not going anywhere, Princess. Your mom saved me, just like I saved you. That's what family does." Illyra smiled, and it was like the sun's coming out. "Yes, family. You are my family now, Guardian Jake." The Queen placed her hand over his heart again, that gesture he had come to recognize as deeply meaningful. "You have shown my people what it means to fight with honor and compassion," she said. "And you have shown my daughter what it means to be brave. For that, I am eternally grateful. Rest now. Heal. We will watch over you." Jake did rest, and he did heal. It took months. His injuries were severe, and he would carry scars for the rest of his life. But he recovered, with the help of both human medicine and Valthene healing techniques. The two species learned from each other, combining their knowledge to create new treatments that saved countless lives on both sides. During his recovery, Jake spent a lot of time with Illyra. She was a bright, curious child, and she wanted to learn everything about humans. He taught her about Earth, about human history and culture. She taught him about Valthene traditions and languages. They became friends in a way that transcended the guardian-protected relationship. One day, as they sat in the gardens aboard the flagship, Illyra asked him a question that caught him off guard. "Why did you save me, Guardian Jake? You did not know I was a princess." "You did not know about the life debt. Why risk your life for someone you did not know?" Jake thought about it. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally. "Because you were a child who needed help, and I was there. It's that simple and that complicated. Humans have a saying, with great power comes great responsibility. I had the power to help you, so I had the responsibility to do it. That's how we're taught to think." Illyra considered this. "That is very human," she said. "My people think differently. We value logic and tradition. But your way, the human way, it makes my heart feel warm." She touched her chest. "I think your way is better," Jake smiled. "Not better, just different. Both our peoples have things to teach each other. That's what makes this alliance so special." "We balance each other out. Your logic helps us think before we act." "Our compassion helps you act when thinking is not enough." Illyra nodded sagely, looking far older than her years. "I want to be like you when I grow up," she said. "I want to help people, to save them, to be brave." "You already are brave," Jake told her. "You survived 3 days alone in a war zone." Most adults couldn't do that. You have your mother's strength and courage. You're going to do amazing things, Princess. I can feel it. As the months passed and Jake regained his strength, the war continued, but something had shifted. The partnership between humans and Valthene had grown stronger, inspired by the story of a soldier and a princess. Other species began to take notice. The alliance against the Kreth Empire grew, bolstered by the example of two very different peoples working together seamlessly. Jake returned to active duty, leading his Joint Operations Unit in increasingly daring missions. But now he had backup that went beyond military protocol. He had the protection of the Valthene royal family and the life debt that bound them together. It made him a high-value target for the Kreth, but it also made him nearly untouchable. The Valthene would move mountains to keep their guardians safe. And they did, time and time again. Jake lost count of how many times Valthene ships appeared at the last moment to turn the tide of a battle. How many times Valthene soldiers threw themselves into danger to protect him. The life debt wasn't just words, it was a living bond that manifested in actions and sacrifice. The war raged on for another year. Slowly, painfully, the Alliance pushed the Kreth back. Territory was reclaimed, prisoners were freed. And through it all, Jake and his unit saved lives. Thousands of them. Maybe tens of thousands. He stopped counting after a while. Numbers felt wrong. Every life was individual, precious, worthy of protection. The final battle took place in orbit around the Kreth homeworld. It was the largest fleet engagement in galactic history, involving dozens of species and thousands of ships. Jake was there, leading a strike team to disable the Kreth command station. The fighting was fierce, but the Alliance had learned to fight together, combining their strengths in ways the Kreth couldn't counter. Human pilots provided cover while Valthene battlecruisers hammered the enemy positions. Ground troops from a dozen species worked in perfect coordination, each one protecting the others. It was everything Jake had hoped for when he saved Alira. Different peoples, different cultures, united by the simple belief that life was worth fighting for. The Kreth command station fell. The Empire surrendered. After 4 years of war, it was finally over. The galaxy erupted in celebration. Ships of every species fired their weapons in salute. Messages of joy and relief flooded communication channels. The war was won. Jake stood on the observation deck of the Valthene flagship, watching the celebration. He was exhausted, physically and emotionally. The war had taken so much from everyone. But they had won. They had survived. And more importantly, they had proven that different species could work together, could care for each other, could build something better than endless conflict. Queen Lyria found him there, Alira beside her. The princess was 12 now, no longer the frightened child he had rescued. She was taller, more confident, already showing signs of the leader she would become. But she still looked at Jake with the same gratitude and affection she had shown that first day. "It is over," the Queen said, standing beside him. "Thanks to you and countless others like you, we have peace again." Jake shook his head. "Not just me. Everyone who fought. Everyone who believed we could win. Everyone who chose to protect rather than destroy." Alira tugged at his sleeve. "Guardian Jake, will you come back to our homeworld for the victory celebration? My mother is throwing a huge festival, and I want you to be there. Please." Jake looked down at her, seeing both the child she had been and the young woman she was becoming. "Of course, Princess. I wouldn't miss it for anything." The victory celebration on the Valthene homeworld was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. Millions of people filled the streets, dancing and singing. Humans and Valthene mingled freely, sharing stories and laughter. Other species joined in, creating a tapestry of different cultures united by joy and relief. Jake was given a hero's welcome, though he deflected the praise at every opportunity. He wasn't a hero. He was just a soldier who had done his job. But people didn't want to hear that. They wanted to believe in heroes, in the idea that individual actions mattered. So he accepted the praise gracefully and tried to use his platform to honor those who had sacrificed everything. The formal ceremony took place in the royal palace, a structure of stunning beauty that seemed to grow from the planet itself. Jake stood before the assembled nobility of the Valthene Star Collective, feeling distinctly out of place in his dress uniform. But Queen Lyria had insisted, and he had learned not to argue with her. The Queen spoke to the assembly in Valthene, then switched to English so Jake could understand. Today we honor not just a soldier, but a friend. Not just an ally, but family. Lieutenant Captain Jake Morrison showed us the true meaning of courage when he risked everything to save my daughter. He showed us that compassion is not weakness, but the greatest strength any being can possess. Today we officially name him Protector of the Realm, Guardian of the Royal Line, and friend to all Valthene. But more than that, we name him Brother. He is family now and forever. The assembly erupted in applause. Alira came forward carrying a ceremonial sword. It was made of a metal Jake didn't recognize, light as a feather but obviously strong. She presented it to him with both hands. "This is the Blade of Guardians," she said, her voice clear and strong. "It has been carried by only 3 others in our history. Now it is yours, Guardian Jake. May it protect you as you have protected us." Jake accepted the sword, feeling the weight of history and responsibility. "Thank you, Princess, Your Majesty, all of you. I am honored beyond measure." After the ceremony, there was a private dinner with the royal family. Just Jake, Queen Lyria, Princess Alira, and a few close advisors. The conversation was warm and easy, full of shared memories and plans for the future. The war was over, but there was so much work to be done. Rebuilding, healing, ensuring the peace held. As the evening wound down, Alira pulled Jake aside. "I have something to show you," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She led him to a balcony overlooking the city. The celebration was still going strong below, lights and music filling the night. "Look," she said, pointing to the sky. "Up there, that constellation. Do you see it?" Jake looked up. The Valthene homeworld had 3 moons and a sky full of unfamiliar stars. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Alira continued. "That constellation is called the Guardian. It has been there for millions of years. But after you saved me, our astronomers discovered a new star in that constellation. A very bright one. They named it Morrison's Star, after you. Now, whenever I look up at night, I can see your star shining. It reminds me that even in the darkest times there is light. There are people who care. There are guardians watching over us." Jake felt emotion tighten his throat. "That's beautiful, Princess. Thank you." Alira turned to him, her silver eyes serious. "I want you to know something, Guardian Jake. When I am queen someday, I will rule the way you taught me, with compassion. With courage, with the belief that every life matters. You saved more than just my life that day on Varro 7. You saved who I am, who I will become. And I will spend my life honoring that." Jake knelt down, even though she was almost as tall as him now. "You are going to be an amazing queen, Alira. The galaxy is lucky to have you." She hugged him tightly. "And I am lucky to have you, Guardian. Thank you for everything." Later that night, Jake stood alone on the balcony looking up at Morrison's star. It twinkled in the alien sky, a testament to one impulsive decision to save a child's life. That decision had changed everything. It had forged an alliance, inspired millions, and helped win a war. But more than that, it had created a family, not by blood, but by choice and sacrifice and love. Queen Lyria and Princess Alira were his family now as surely as if they shared DNA. And he would protect them, as they protected him, for as long as he lived. That was the human way. That was what made them different. They saw beyond species and politics and strategic advantage. They saw people who needed help, and they helped them. Simple as that. Complicated as that. Jake touched the Guardian star crystal hanging around his neck. It pulsed warmly against his chest, a physical reminder of the bond he shared with the Valthene royal family, the life debt. It was real and powerful and eternal. He thought about all the lives he had saved, all the families he had reunited. Martinez's sacrifice had made it possible. So many others had given everything so that children like Alira could grow up safe. Their sacrifice wasn't in vain.
The galaxy was better now. Still flawed, still dangerous in places, but better.
More hopeful, and hope, Jake had learned, was the most powerful weapon in any arsenal.
It was what kept you fighting when everything looked impossible. It was what made you run into enemy fire to save a child you didn't know.
It was what built alliances and ended wars and created families across species lines. As he stood there, watching Morrison's star shine in the alien sky, Jake smiled.
The war was over. His people were safe. Alira was alive and would one day be a great queen, and he had a family that spanned species and worlds, bound by something stronger than blood.
Bound by choice, sacrifice, and love. That was worth everything. That was why he fought. That was why he would keep fighting, if fighting was ever needed again. Because in a galaxy full of darkness and danger, humans brought light. They brought hope. They brought the stubborn, foolish, beautiful belief that every single life mattered. And as long as humans remained human, as long as they kept running into impossible situations to save people who needed saving, the galaxy would be okay. It would be better than okay. It would be extraordinary. Jake touched the ceremonial sword at his side, felt the weight of the guardian star on his chest, and looked one more time at his namesake star shining in the sky. Then he turned and walked back inside, ready for whatever the future held.
Ready to keep protecting, keep caring, keep being human in a galaxy that desperately needed to learn what that meant, because that was what Guardians did.
They watched over their families. They protected the innocent. They fought for what was right, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And Jake Morrison, human soldier and guardian of the Valthene royal line, would do that until his last breath. That was his promise, his vow, his purpose. And he would never break it.